So this week, you guys were talking about different things like how to learn in college, but also talking about what they call the hidden curriculum. So that's where there's a lot of these expectations in college where students are expected to do certain things before class, after class, etc. Um, but they're never really told to students. It's just kind of assumed that students know this, and that can throw a lot of students because in high school you're pretty much like walked through and told here's what you need to do, here's what you do next, here's what you need to do. Whereas in college, I mean, they'll tell you obviously like here's when your exam is, here's when your assignments due, but in terms of like studying or reaching out for help or anything like that, it's really assumed that the student knows when to do those things, and a lot of us don't know when to do those things. So we're going to kind of cover just kind of certain expectations that you're that professors have of students so that way you can be better prepared for your classes. So I'm gonna break it into three different parts, like before class, what you're supposed to be doing before class, what you're supposed to be doing during class, and then what you do after class. So before class, it is expected that you read or review any chapters, any readings that you're assigned um, before you come to class. The easiest way to do this, I find, is kind of to make a to-do list for the week. Put any due dates for assignments, and then block off time for like reading your textbook or taking notes. This is actually my calendar from when I was in school, and I put in there, read chapter 1, read chapter 2. Like I put that on my calendar so I didn't forget to read the notes. So that way when I did get to class, I was prepared for whatever my professor was going over. Excuse me. And I knew what was kind of happening in the lecture. If I had any questions, I was prepared to ask any questions, and I kind of knew what was going on. Now, if you say, well, I don't have enough time to read like a full chapter before, that's okay. So there's a couple of ways you can do this. So you can read the entire chapters. So this picture I have on the right here shows basically reading the chapter. And when you read the chapter, you don't just want to like kind of scan through. You actually want to read it. You want to like highlight important things. So you can see here I've got like definitions. I've got important keynotes that are highlighted. Now, if you're like, well, I don't have enough time for that, or that's okay. So what I would recommend if you don't have enough time, or you just kind of want to get an idea of what your professor is going to be going over, read the summaries at the end of each section. Usually, there's at the end of every little section in your textbook, you'll find these summaries, and that just is a brief, obviously, summary of what went over that. So read that. That will give you a rough idea if you don't have enough time. So at least you're somewhat prepared going into the lecture and you kind of know a little bit of what's going on. During class. It is expected during class that you're going to take notes. Please take notes. It doesn't matter what style you use, if you prefer Cornell, if you prefer outline, if you have what my brother does, which I like to call organized chaos, but it makes sense to him. As long as it makes sense to you, but take notes. Even if they say, well, like my professor prints off PowerPoints and I have that, that's fine. Make notes off to the side because you're not going to remember it. And I'm speaking from experience. Remember it later. And that way you can refer to it, your notes, when you're studying. Okay, they expand on this point, because some professors, they don't just read off the PowerPoints. They add a lot of extra things and extra details that you also need to know. Ask questions. Your professors have no idea. I mean, they can kind of tell from like certain cues, like, okay, my whole class is off, but sometimes it's hard to tell, like, are you understanding it? Are you just really tired? So like ask questions. Don't be afraid to like raise your hand, like, I have no idea what you're talking about. This makes no sense to me. Can you like explain it a different way? If you're taking labs, so a lot of your science classes have labs, right? Like chemistry, you go to lecture and then you go to lab, same thing with biology, etc. Make sure you participate in the lab. These are building on what you learned in lecture. It's the application of that. So make sure you're participating. Make sure you know what's going on. And all of those skills that you learn in one lab, they kind of build on each other, right? Like, so the first labs deal a lot with, like, say, measurement and how to use a graduated cylinder, how to weigh things, and you'll need that later in other labs because it's going to be expected. Like, well, you remember, you already learned how to do that, so now you're going to measure these things, and then now you're going to do this. So they all build on each other, so make sure you're participating. So there's a lot of different ways you can take notes. So these are both different ways I've taken notes. So one professor here on the left gave us kind of an outline, but he didn't fill it all in. So as he was lecturing, we had to fill in the notes to make sure we were paying attention, staying engaged in the class. So that's one way of doing that. And I'd add things off to the side if I felt there were things that he didn't add in the notes. And then on the right here, I've got kind of I prefer outline format. You do not have to use that if you don't like it. But another way of my taking notes, and you can see, I've got kind of things organized. I also highlight things. I use pink for definitions and then green for like important points that I need to know. But the important point is to take notes. Find what works for you. It can look different. You can use different note styles too for different classes. If you're like, well, this works for that class, but I prefer Cornell for this other class, that's fine. As long as it makes sense to you, as long as you understand it. After class. So after class, it's expected that you're going to study and you're going to review. Make sure you review your notes often. Even if you live 20 minutes, that's okay. Take those 20 minutes, kind of review and go over your notes, kind of figure out like what you understand, what you're not understanding, anything like that. So review, study, put it on your calendar if you need to do that. Work on any assignments or projects. Space them out to make sure you're not getting overwhelmed. So this is actually like a to-do list I had over here on this picture here, where I would, for like papers or really big projects, is I said, I'm only working on the intro today. I'm not going to worry about anything else, just work on the intro. And then, a few days later, okay, I'm working on part 1 or part 2. And it makes it feel less overwhelming and you kind of stay on track a lot better. So that way by the time that your assignment is due, you've already completed all the thing. You just have to kind of like review it, turn it in, and you're done. Because in college, your professor is not going to space them out for you. You're expected to figure out how to space that and how to manage your time with your assignments on your own. Sometimes it's a little trial and error, and that's okay. But figure out kind of the time in your day. And like I said, even if it's 20 minutes, that's okay. 20 minutes is better than nothing. If something doesn't make sense, get help. I'm going to say this again. If something doesn't make sense, get help. Your professors, your tutors, and we don't know if you're struggling. We don't know if something doesn't make sense. In college, it's expected that if you're struggling with something, if you're confused about something, you're the one that needs to reach out. You can contact your professor and ask them through email or phone or however they prefer to be contacted. You can go to office hours. So office hours are hours that are specifically set aside, that the professor sets aside, that are for students. Basically, you can drop in, you can ask them questions. It is for you guys to get clarification about anything that you're confused about. Or if you just want to talk to them, you can also drop by and just talk to them. Tutoring. There is tutoring offered at all of the Lone Star College campuses. So at the Kingwood campus, we have tutoring pretty much Monday through Saturday. Drop by. We have it for a variety of subjects. They can help you, even if you have a simple question, just like, I just need help with this like one part. That's fine. Come in, ask. Study groups. Study groups are a really great way to kind of, because you're with your classmates, so you know exactly what was said in lecture, but it can help bounce ideas off of each other, and that can also help with clarification, clearing things up. But either way, like, reach out, get help if you need it. So this link here links to the tutoring web pages for all the various campuses. So if you click it, you'll see that it lists all the campuses. So like, click whichever campus you want. A lot of campuses offer in-person tutoring. Some campuses also offer online tutoring as well. But you can see the hours, you can see what subjects are available and what works for you. Now, if you want to contact your professor, you say, well, I don't know how to contact them, or I don't know where to find it. So this is a sample syllabus. You're going to use the syllabus. So on the first page, it's going to list here your instructor's name, their office. Some instructors have offices, some don't. So if virtual, it probably means they don't have an office, but you can meet with them virtually. And then it says here, conference hours or student hours, and then it will tell you either if they basically say, email me and we can set up an appointment, which is what this one says, or it's going to have specific days and times. If it has specific days and times, and you're like, well, I can't make that, email them. Usually professors are more than happy to set aside time later at any point to talk with a student to make sure that you understand what's going on. And if you're like, well, I don't know where their email is. So down here, it'll have their email. It'll have their office phone number if they have a phone number, but here would be their email. So you can email them and ask them questions. The other thing to remember is that life happens. We all understand that your class is not the only thing happening in your life. It may not even be the most important thing happening in your life, and that's okay. So if something happens, if you're sick, if there's, a funeral happening or any sort of extenuating circumstances, a lot of your professors understand and they will give you an extension. The key is you have to reach out and you have to let them know because, like I said, we have no idea if you don't tell us. So please don't hesitate if you're having a hard time with something, anything like that. If you're like, I need to let them know, like, this is what's also going on and this is what's also like causing some struggles in the class, reach out to them and they are more than willing to help, to work with you, to help you, like, to get whether it's giving an extension on something, whether it's reworking something, however it is, help that they can give you. So please let them know. Like, we all deal with stuff as well, so we understand. So this is an example for me, to give you an example that it can work. So I was taking a class, and at the beginning of the class, my grandmother passed away. It was really hard, and we had an exam, as you see in the top, the left-hand side here, and I clearly, as you can see, did terrible, just did awful. And my professor knew it was like really odd for me to do that bad, so he wrote the note that he'd be happy to talk to me. And it was very stressful, right? Like, it's a little like stressful to go talk to your professor, right? I get it. So I walked in, and I had him a couple times before, but it's still kind of scary, right? So I walked in and was like kind of nervous, and kind of like, he was like, like, what's going on, like, and so I kind of just briefly told him. I didn't go into a lot of details, but like kind of briefly told him, like, hey, like, my grandmother passed away, it was really hard. So he's like, okay, he's like, so, and said he was sorry and all that. And then he's like, all right, so look, I do this for other students, but I'm going to offer it to you, basically, is that, like, here are some better note-taking tips, because I was having some issues with note-taking as well. So we went over that, and then was like, all right, because, there's some other stuff going on. He referred me to the counseling center and all that, so I went there, and he was like, also, so the next task is, if you do better, I'll replace your first grade with the second grade. So, like I said, I went to the counseling center, I worked on the note-taking tips, kind of, and the counseling center was able to help me kind of balance out, like, school stuff and, like, stuff with my grandmother and all of that. And so by the time the next test came around, as you can see, I got a 94. So I did way better. And he stuck to his word. So he replaced my first quiz, the 42, with the 94. So this is to point out to you, though, that, like, if I hadn't talked to him, I wouldn't have had that option. I wouldn't have had any of that help that I really did need. So it does work. They do care. Please reach out. The other thing too sometimes is staying motivated, right? Like, in college, it's you're pretty much the one to motivate yourself. So if you're struggling with that, like, reach out to friends or family. They can be amazing cheerleaders. I know in, like, my family friend group chat, we are really close, is we all support each other. Like, if we do something awesome, we usually put it in the chat and everyone's like, that's so cool, that's great. Like, we support each other, and it's really great to get that, like, right, positive feedback, that positive, like, you are really awesome. The other thing too that can help is rewarding yourself. So if you spend all day studying and you're like, all right, I've reached my limit, I'm done, go hang out with friends. You have earned it. If you pass a really hard exam, it's a movie night. I used to do this all the time with my physics class because I hate physics. And the only way to really, like, motivate myself was to basically, like, if you finish this exam, if you study for this, then you can go watch this movie or you can go do this thing. And that can sometimes be the way that helps you get through the class as well. So that is it for this